Hi everyone, I'm Mary, the godmother behind recipe blog goodygodmother.com, and I am here today so that we can make my Stay Soft caramel sauce together. Now my Stay Soft caramel sauce is one of my most popular fall recipes. It went up last year, and this year I was getting several blog comments from readers who were having challenges when they were making the caramel sauce for various reasons. So I decided to make a tutorial video so I can actually show you how I make my caramel sauce and hopefully answer some of the questions and help you be successful in your own homemade caramel making endeavors. Before we step into my office, and I shifted the camera so you can see what's going on in my pot, I'm just going to share a couple pointers that I think it's important to highlight. First of all, you're going to want to use a light colored pot. This is my current caramel making pot. It's a bit big, but as you can see, it's stainless steel, so I can see the color in the pot. It's important, you can't really use a dark pot because you won't see the color change, and caramel goes from undercooked to perfect to burnt in a matter of maybe 15 seconds. So you want to be sure that you can see the color change throughout the entire process. 2, I haven't found this to be necessary 100% of the time, but because I do use the wet method when making my caramel, I like to keep a pastry brush handy and a small bowl of water so I can brush down any sugar crystals that form on the side of the pan while the sugar is melting. It hasn't always been required for me, but on drier days or when I'm working in a location with lower humidity, I just find that it's helpful. I have girlfriends who will actually cover their caramel pot while the sugar is melting to help prevent sugar crystals from forming. And to be honest, if there aren't very many sugar crystals forming, you can probably get away with doing nothing at all. So finally, we're going to talk about the sugar. I alternate the kind of sugar that I purchase. Recently I've been purchasing a lot of the organic sugar that I can find at my bulk warehouse, but the problem is that sugar is not a good sugar to work with if you are a caramel making novice, because the crystals are a little larger and they're a little less processed. So that means they're more jagged and they are more likely to create that crystallization that you really don't want. So super fine granulated sugar, just your standard white sugar, is probably your best option to start, especially if you're a caramel making newbie. If you have the slightly larger crystal sugar, you can go ahead and pop it into a food processor and pulse it a couple times to break down the crystals a bit. I don't necessarily think that it's a requirement. I don't do this. This is just standard granulated sugar, like the kind you get at any grocery store. And I don't break this down to super fine, so you really can skip that step. But if all you have in the house would be, say, like the larger, for example, organic granulated sugar, then I would go ahead and pulse that a couple times just so you can break down the crystals a little bit more and hopefully try to mitigate some of that risk of crystallization that will happen when you're making the caramel, because you don't want to create rock candy. You want a nice, smooth, creamy caramel sauce. So we're going to step into my office. I'm going to adjust the camera and then we're going to make caramel. All right, so I've gone ahead and I've placed my pot on my burner. The gas is still off. I'm just going to add my sugar, and this entire recipe is on my website, goodygodmother.com. Look for Stay Soft caramel sauce. I'll turn this on to medium heat, and I'm going to go ahead and add my water. This is called the wet method of caramel making. The dry method would just be leaving the sugar in the pot to melt. As a novice caramel maker, I found the wet method to be more consistent, so I've just sort of stuck with it. I'm just moving the pan around to try and get the water somewhat distributed over the sugar to help promote even melting. Whatever, it'll be fine. Now, on the side, I have my bowl of water and my pastry brush, and I also have my additional mix-ins already prepared and measured out. So that's 3/4 cup heavy cream and 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. If you'd like to add vanilla extract, sometimes I do, have a teaspoonful of vanilla extract measured out and set aside. I'll let you know when we'll add it. Today I'm not adding any vanilla extract because there's not any vanilla extract written in the blog recipe. So as you can see, let me see. As you can see right here along the edge, there's a tiny bit of crystallization that's forming, and I don't necessarily want that. So again, your options are either to cover the pot right here, allowing the condensation that forms naturally inside the sealed pot to prevent those crystals from forming, do nothing, or just take your pastry brush, dip it in a bit of water, and brush it along the edges. A little water isn't going to hurt. It might just take a little longer for your sugar to caramelize, but an extra 30 seconds or so invested in waiting is not a big deal when you end up with a gorgeous jar of caramel sauce. Speaking of which, make sure you also have some sort of heat-proof container to transfer your caramel immediately. If you leave your caramel in this pot if you leave the caramel in this pot after you've finished incorporating the cream and the butter, the caramel will continue to cook, and then you will have burnt caramel. And that's not what we want. So I just use a glass mason jar. Now, one important thing to note, and I think this might be the cause of some of the challenges that I'm being emailed about, is to make sure that your pot is free of any impurities. So it's always a good idea to give your pot a little extra rinse just to make sure that there's no soap residue or there's nothing left in there that might bond with the sugar. So I just take a rubber spatula right now in these early stages and move the sugar around a bit because I want to make sure that it completely dissolves. If I leave a chunk of sugar in here, I'm going to end up with crystallization and caramel that turns hard in the fridge really quickly. Now, we do not have an invert sugar in this caramel sauce. And when I mention an invert sugar, I'm talking about something like honey or corn syrup, and those are used commercially to extend the life of caramel sauces, but I try to avoid using those in cooking whenever possible, and it's just not something that I look to add to my caramel sauce. So this caramel sauce really has a shelf life of maybe about 3 to 4 days in the refrigerator. And then it will start to slightly crystallize just because that's the natural property of sugar. It will crystallize. All right. And I'm doing pretty good, making sure that there are no stuck bits of sugar at the bottom of my pot. Everything's coming up nice and smooth, so we're going to turn up the heat in just a minute. and watch the magic happen. All right, now I'm gonna stop stirring, and you actually won't see me stir again, ever. Because once and I'm just gonna give this one more quick brush because I see some little crystals forming because I was pushing those bits of sugar that hadn't dissolved yet up against each other. And when you knock them against each other, they have a tendency to wanna stick together. There's a lot of chemistry in baking, which is pretty cool. So as you can see, I have this beautiful now sugar water mixture, and I'm gonna go ahead and just scooch my camera a little closer to make sure that you get the best look into the pot. I'm going to turn up my heat just a bit, take it from a medium to a medium high. And now we're going to wait for that beautiful copper penny color that I talk about in the blog post. That's what you're looking for to get a nice final color on your caramel sauce and to make sure that it's cooked enough. You don't want to stir the caramel at this point, or the sugar mixture at all at this point, but every once in a while you will want to give the pan a quick swirl, very gently, just to ensure that there are no hot spots in the pan, because not every pan perfectly distributes heat and not every oven perfectly distributes heat, and you just want to try and minimize any possible issues with your sauce. So you can see the very slightest color change starting back there. Obviously we haven't reached the color that we want, and you're going to see me swirl ever so slightly, because while there is a bit of a color change there isn't a color change consistent through the entire pot. Now, the moment this reaches that copper penny color that I keep talking about, you are going to see me turn off the heat, drop in the butter, and whisk in the heavy cream. There's not really a lot of time to talk through it, so I'm telling you this in advance so you can just sort of watch it happen. Again, you're looking for a nice even color throughout the entire pot, not just in one spot, which is why the swirling gently occasionally is so important. And I think we've got it in about 5 seconds. One more swirl to check. And you see that? That looks gorgeous. So, off goes my heat. Sorry, I think I fogged up the lens. Oh well. So as you can see, I have this beautiful rich color, and I need to transfer this immediately. So it's nice and smooth, gorgeous. Wear a glove. Do this over a sink if you'd like to. This caramel is very hot. And there we go. One super creamy, beautifully colored, very, very warm caramel sauce. I'm going to go ahead and pop this in the fridge with these measurements for heavy cream and for butter. This caramel sauce will stay spoonable even straight out of the fridge. Oh, I almost forgot to mention. So if you would like to add the vanilla extract to this, you would stir in the vanilla extract at this point, actually, right after you remove the caramel from the heat. So you may choose to do that either in the pan just before you transfer, or you could actually just pop about a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of vanilla extract right into your caramel right this second. And then you'll end up with a beautifully flavored caramel sauce. If you are looking to turn this into a salted caramel sauce and you'd like the salt stirred right into the caramel as opposed to separate, you would go ahead and add half a teaspoon of sea salt. So I hope you enjoy, darlings. I hope this helps answer some of your caramel questions and provides you with the guidance that you need to make your own caramel sauce successfully. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free. Shoot me an email, write me a blog comment. I try to get to everything as soon as possible and be available to answer questions. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I'm the Godmother, and happy baking.